All right, awesome. So we're here with Tabytha Gonzalez, and I'm super excited. This is our first one in the TGNC Harm Reduction Baddies series. So Tabitha, tell us how you got started in harm reduction and just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Tabytha Gonzalez, pronouns she, her, and hers. How I got into this movement, I was around some amazing people, and they were organizing around a memorial for Marsha P. on Christopher Street Pier. And I went there, and it was Cecilia Gentili, Sean Coleman, Lala Zanel, and many other great, community activists showed up that day to, honor and to memorialize Sylvia Rivera. And they had asked me to speak, and at that point I was, nervous. I didn't know, if I had the right words to say, like, but then I started thinking about the importance of us being there and why I'm in that space and why others before me in regards to Sylvia and Marsha and, the ballroom community, like Octavia Danielles and all those people before me, because the village was someplace where I grew up at to memorialize someone who, you know, is a veteran riot person who actually galvanized the whole gay rights movement. I had liberties because of people like Marsha and people like the women in Ballroom who cultivated and taught me. And not having the direct connection to some of them, but learning through what their experience and how their impact was helpful to my development and access that I have today. Um, I started to speak, and I wanted to speak from a place of honesty and truth, right? I was new. I felt like I was wet behind the ears. I didn't necessarily have language. But when I spoke, something happened. People listened. People applauded. People felt it. And I knew then that I had the gift to create and evoke feelings through storytelling. And that's when I just knew that what they saw for me, I now saw for myself because they already saw what was already in me. And as I would continue on, I would do a lot of volunteer work, a lot of outreach work. And sometimes that outreach even started before I started receiving like incentives or stipend pays for being a peer in spaces. When I was a former sex worker, when I was sex working, like if I gave someone a condom, all we needed to know is that we needed to survive and we needed to do it safely. So by me giving someone a condom or someone so they can access, you know, or do what they needed to do to survive, that's outreach, right? Because normally we had these little pretty packets with the lubrication and, all these little nice knickknacks because they knew that we were going to do what we needed to do to survive, but they wanted us to do it safely. And not only did people come by occasionally did that, but we did it amongst ourselves. So the thing about us in the sex work community and how you access harm reduction is more of a community, right? We're not just some people on the corner. I knew that I can go to this area and I was around friends and sisters who knew where the best money was at, where the best drugs was at, all that. So it became a community to me. I would later on grow on to no longer sex work, but I'm still not far removed from the community, the importance of harm reduction to the sex work community, the importance of harm reduction as it pertains to someone who's living a life of recovery. Like I was a substance user. So I know what it looks like to use substance. I know what it is to have a traditional approach to it with just abstinence and go to care. But being someone who is a woman of trans experience or someone who's non-binary or someone who's transmasculine, it's very difficult when you're accessing harm reduction in institutions that are not designed to have the full capacity to deal with us as a whole person and not just an identity. To figure out why we got there. There's different levels to harm reduction. And there's different reasons why we access that. And most importantly, that I've discovered in my journey with harm reduction is that you have to meet them where they're at. Meeting them where they're at is sometimes just giving them clean supplies so they'll be able to, self-effecate safety in the best way they can. So there's different lens to it. For me, the ultimate goal is to get you to live a life of recovery. But even if that is not someone else's choice, as someone who wants to make sure their stuff, they have narcan kits, a lot of fluids to hydrate. All those things are very important. Yeah. So yeah, I got into it. I've worn many different hats: fundraising, community organizer, community educator, community leaders. These are titles that people throw around. I don't know if I ever saw myself as a leader. Even though people call me a leader, I now know that I'm a leader. I believe that now. But because for me, I didn't associate it with a title. What I did came from a genuine place of wanting to see my community thrive and wanted to see us access that safely, to know what it would be to live out a life outside, a life in recovery, you know, outside of just the constant day-to-day survival sex and stuff like that. But I wanted to know what it would look like, and I wanted my community to have it. And if that constitutes leadership, then I'm the best person for the job, and the title fits me because I am a door of resources to many.
Mm-hmm. So now you're kind of at this point where you're passing the torch on, right? So like when you talked about it beautifully, because when in a lot of our trainings, we do foundations of harm reduction, we talk about the concept of meeting people where they are, but we don't leave them there, right? So with you found over time, you're giving people resources, whether it's a condom, whether you're giving someone clean supplies, syringes, things like that. All of that stuff keeps people engaged. And when you keep people engaged, they're going to keep coming back, right? And you're able to open up more, have conversations with them, and then that could lead to a number of different possibilities.
What's behind the unknown? Because most people won't move forward because they don't know what it is. I think about my kids who are now doing the work. I think about my friends who have been doing the work light years before me. I think about all the shoulders that I stand on who have gone before me, who have done this work. So when I think about that, I try to remove myself from doing the work and just being a vessel for my community. And being a vessel allowed things to flow through me into me. And I'm able to help and see, because one thing about when we talk about harm reduction and service, you know, I always was one to try to make sure that it was client centered or person centered, where as though I'm going to do my part. I can show you where everything is at. I can even go with you on your first visit. You are totally responsible for how you navigate that. And when you're ready, and harm reduction have taught me that when they're ready, they'll do it. Because if you're doing the work and you're attaching the emotion to the work, because it is emotional labor, it hurts when you see people not thriving. That becomes the personal piece. And not saying that you don't want to feel or be empathetic to what's happening, but you also don't want to feel responsible for someone not living a life of recovery or using the harm reductive tools that that was given to them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I know when I was working as an HIV medical case manager, I
Mm-hmm.
struggled with that because our program had specific requirements and not everybody really gave a crap about those requirements. And it was my job to figure out what tools I could give to somebody to just maybe get them to the next level or just survive one more day. Sometimes it's just about getting through that next hour, that night, that day, that week. That's it. That's all people are thinking about. Yeah.
And that's the reality. And maybe even a small conversation can take them and change them, right? So it's about what you can do in the moment.
100%.
And,
I love
and
that.
sometimes what you do in the moment can last a lifetime. I know if it wasn't for the people before me who actually was able to open doors for me, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I didn't have the loving, supportive husband that I have, I could not do this.
Yeah.
My kids remind me every day as they teach me and language and boundaries and the importance of being able to self-identify. Okay, so today I had the pleasure of being a part of the Gender Recognition Act, and I saw some people who I worked with previously at organizations that were working effortlessly and continue to work to make sure that people had the right to their own person, to have their own identity, and to own that legally, to legally transition, even if it's not medically. I know how important it was for me. So today, seeing that when I'm pouring into my kids, I know that they have a better chance, that when they access spaces, that whether they're non-binary or gender non-conforming, and whether they're sex workers, whether they're substance users, that they have the right to a harm reductive lens, and as it pertains to care, that we have, like they deserve that. It's their divine right.
Mm-hmm.
And they continuously remind me of how we are and how humanity continues to evolve. um it's a blessing that I have good people in my life, and I continue to try to always put that in front of why I do what I do.
Right. Yeah.
Aside from me being able to live and sustain myself, right? Because it's also, if I'm not well, then I can't be well for others. So
Yes.
being a part of those things that are important, like making sure that our next generation thrives and knows what it looks like to have a life of recovery if they so choose, but if they don't, to continue to be supportive through that journey as well.
Right. Right. It's all about engagement, supporting, and you brought up some important things around self care and boundaries, because I think that's something that maybe, we like to think we're good at, but a lot of times when we do this work, right, we put ourselves on the front lines and I mean, how many hours a day are you really working? I mean, that's the thing. How many hours a week, right? Like we find ourselves answering DMs, phone calls, doing interviews like this, working at our full time job, volunteering, going and answering a crisis call for someone that's not well. I mean, it just goes on and on. I'm sure you're no stranger to that.
Of course, I mean, like, it's even on the weekends, like when you're just trying to unwind and just get into your own self-care, you get those calls. And I know the urgency of it, but I also know the realistic part about it is that I can't really do anything on the weekend because nothing is open and accessible during that time, unless it's an emergency. And then there's a whole bunch of red tape to get them to those type of services as well. But my experience has just been to initiate healthy boundaries. And it may hurt sometimes, right? Because you want to help. One thing that I've discovered in this work is that it's me first, and I have to preserve me. Because while being in this field and being a vessel for people, it has a way, like if you're pouring so much out, who's pouring into you? Because I'm always challenged to lean into everyone else's feelings and boundaries and understandings and understand them. But when I need that, it's like nobody understands. And it was like that for a long time. A lot of people had a different impression about me, and they had all these different ideas about me until I discovered who I am, where your ideas do not constitute who I am. And I have to be me regardless on how you perceive that, right? Because I have my own journey. And I also want to just say thank you to the people who stayed in my life and continue to help and guide me, because even that was, supportive in helping me reduce my substance use, and gave me access to want to go back to school, right? To want to do things. It was having that supportive people around me. And yeah, that's what did it for me. And that's why I know it's important for me to make sure that others have those same options. So for me, it's about finding that balance and that boundary where, like my sister had taught me a saying, and it stuck with me. And ever since I heard that, it stuck. Your poor planning is not my immediate emergency.
Oh my gosh, one of my
And
favorite people says that. One of my favorite people in my last job would always say that. I love that. I love
I
that.
mean, it kind of put things in its perspective. While I want to be accessible to you, we all have, some of us, not all, but the goal is to get everyone to be able to self effocate and to be able to control how they navigate and what type of care they want for themselves. And everyone has that human right to make sure that they are being cared for in the best way that, helps them. Because, like safety is not a one size fit all. How
Absolutely
you give
not.
care to people is not a one size fit all lens. You
No.
know, how you approach people who are sex workers or substance users, you can't approach everybody the same. So you have to meet people where they're at. And
Truly.
you have to come, and people can tell right away if you're full of shit.
That's the truth.
You know,
That's the truth.
like people be like, "Oh, I'm just a number," and you know, and you be like, "Oh no, you're not," and I'm not gonna tell you that. I'm gonna say, "Yes, you are.
Oh,
Yes, you
absolutely.
are. You are definitely a number, and your number is important to us keeping these doors open so we could continue to provide service to those who want it, and even you when you're ready." You
Yeah.
know, so if I can have you come in here and sit down for a couple of hours, because I can pour everything I can into you, and I really can't pour a lot into you within these 1 hour to 2 hours tops, right?
Hmm.
There's so many more hours of the day. What someone does with what you give them, it's totally a decision that they make.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
Hmm.
not saying that I don't care because you planned poorly. What I'm saying is let's work on it together. What are we gonna do different? And not use the language of we, because I need them to know I'm here with you. Okay, we messed this up. What are we gonna do next?
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Not, oh well, I gave you what you were supposed to have and you didn't do it. So oh well, here's
Hmm.
what you do next. No. What are we gonna do? So they don't feel alone. Because I remember there are times when I felt alone when it didn't take, when I left the program, or when I, did something I wasn't supposed to do. Normally I was by myself when I did those things, but mentally I felt alone.
Right. Right.
So to have that support around you is great.
That's why, folks like you doing the work, connecting with
Thank
people in the
you.
community, it's such a big deal. It really is. And also because of what this project is about, right? It was born out of Transgender Day of Visibility, which is so crucial because, yes, it's great that we have this visibility, but at the same time, when we're making ourselves visible, are we then making ourselves more susceptible to getting harassed or violence, right? So it's like that push
I
and pull, you know?
I say it all the time. People are so quick to, let me get the mic. Let me say something. Let me do this. Listen, just by grabbing a mic and speaking at a rally and putting yourself, visibility comes at a cost. And I've learned this from this pastor named Keon. He said, pain pays. Most of the times we're in these spaces being interviewed, being on panels is because of the pain that we went through. So instead of giving your pain to everyone, don't waste your pain, because in your pain there's purpose, right? So I'm learning all these new things about myself. And when I think about, when I'm out there and I'm visible, the amount of harm that I place upon myself, I'm visible. So I'm mindful that I'm always in the proximity of danger. I'm always in the proximity of violence, or possibly, God forbid, death. Right? I've been in spaces where I thought I was just a stealth, and they're like, "Oh, I saw, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh, and I'm like, okay, now if this person had an issue with, that, then I could possibly, end up in a fight, in the altercation." So just making sure, like even on my job, like like I love the fact that they are so intentional about who they hire, how they hire, and they make sure that you have safety measures as to the best of their ability when you're out, and we're out in visibility day. They're making, like I feel like they definitely prioritize safety for everyone who goes out and do our visibility days here. So, and that was right off the bat. It wasn't something that I had to advocate for. And I'm fortunate enough to be a part of an amazing team that actually, understands the needs, and the protections for humanity. I enjoy the work I do.
That's great. Not a lot of people can say that, but I'm glad you can because.
And I keep trying to frame it differently, right?
Hmm.
Because I've been so used to saying the work. I want to get away from that language for myself. And that's a personal thing. And it may not work for everyone, right? The reason why I say a vessel is because when you do the work, like I said, there's a certain level of possession, ownership, pride that comes with that. And then, like, what are you really working for? Are you working for monetary recognition or monetary gain and temporary recognition? Like recognition, and they give you a plaque or they give you this award, and you can't take that down to the rent office. You can't take that to BJ's and get food. You can't do that. So when you're a vessel, you allow things to flow through you and to you, trusting the universe that will pour back into you and trusting God that He will provide because you're already doing what you were called to do or your purpose in life. I never want to work towards something that is not sustainable. And I've done
Mhm.
that for many years in my life.
Yeah, you
I
burned
no
out.
longer want to live in a life that's unstable or
Hmm.
unsustainable because you do burn out. I'd rather be a vessel because then I'm not like directly connected to this
Right.
responsibility and the realistic of the life that the person who I'm giving the help to that they have to experience on their journey.
Hmm.
So no one can say, "Oh, I did it because of Tabytha." No, you did it because Tabytha opened the door for you and you did the work. I need you to know that. And I used to be upset when people tell me, I'm like, oh, I used to make these videos thanking everybody. Until someone said, why are you doing that? You did the work. They just showed you where it was at. That's their purpose. And the universe and God will put people in place to guide you. And that's what harm reduction is. It's a
Absolutely.
way to approach recovery step by step with them and meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing. I can give it to you. What you do, it's up to you, but I'm going to be here every time you need me.
Right. Being
I'm going to
consistent.
continue to raise awareness around our youth who are dying of crystal meth. I'm going to continue to talk to them and figure out what we can do better. I'm going to continue to go out there and make sure my sex workers are okay. I'm going to continue to be the voice in my community. I'm going to continue to be the example that my kids believe their mom to be.
Mm,
And the wife that my husband knows that his wife is, and the sister and daughter that my chosen family know I am to be.
wow. I
It's
love
bigger
that.
than me.
Yeah.
Harm reduction is a big thing.
Oh yeah, I always talk about it with the staff. I'm like, this is so much bigger than one person. It's so much bigger than us as a group of individuals at a national organization. This exists outside of all of us, and this is for everybody to partake in, right? Because we talk about it not only with sex work, with substance use, with housing, right? Mental health. I mean, it goes to every facet. Physical health, wellness,
Listen,
all of it. All we could
could
talk
you
about this for.
imagine? Like, we could have a big,
I
that'll
know
be a
this is
whole
like a
different topic. Right? Because I'm like, even for us, like, we're at, like, I can connect you to every agency, every voucher program that New York has. But I am not qualified to get it. I don't qualify. So
right.
just like finding being okay with that, like you could be someplace and you get a beautiful apartment in like 3 months, and I'm still struggling to get an apartment because So it's different. It's different.
It's
But if, like I said, when you're a vessel, you allow things to flow to you and things to flow through you. So what
right.
I give out will come back. But that also
Tenfold.
requires me to pour things into myself, and that's when my personal self care come in. Like
Right.
binge watching Game of Thrones or going to church or reading, an Anne Rice novel. Those things that make me feel me, those weird things that I won't show to the world.
Yeah.
That's how I'm able to continue to connect with people
Mm-hmm.
because I'm transparent with that.
Right.
People can tell right away if you're full of shit.
That's so true. It's
you
true.
know,
It's true. And I'm
People
sure
can
that a
tell
lot of
right away.
people. It's the perfect segue because I want you to talk about your work, what harm reduction means to Tabytha, what that means to you. What do you think
Mhm.
we're getting wrong about harm reduction? What do we need to be seeing more of? What are we getting right about harm reduction? Because you talked a little bit about sex work, and that's a big part of harm reduction that not a lot of people talk about, or they don't talk about it in the right way, or the people that need to be talking about it aren't in the room. So I'm just interested for your thoughts on that.
I am a resident host and volunteer person for Ballroom Week here, which is a national ballroom organization that deals with crystal meth and the youth who are using it. So our predominantly target is ballroom and the youth of ballroom. My approach to harm reduction is because I'm traditional in a sense where is that you go, you get treated, you stop use, and this and that. And I realized that there was a high level of recidivism rate for those who were trans and non-binary who would go right back out and relapse. Why? Because when you're not using the harm reductive list, for me, harm reduction means dealing with the whole person, not just half a person. It's not normalizing the substance, but normalizing the person and their experience, right? So for me, it's about understanding why this person is using, like what got them to the point of using, and make sure that they have things in place. Like, if you're gonna use, make sure that you have fluids, make sure that you have a Narcan kit, make sure that you have these things accessible to you, and predominantly that you're around those who know how to administer it should you overdose, right? And the goal of harm reduction is to get you to use less until you're able to not use anymore. So it's dealing with those barriers that you may feel as though are stressors that make you use. May it be, not being able to keep a job or sex work or whatever it is, dealing with that piece of it and dealing with the person as a whole to figure out why do they use this substance and what could you do as a provider to get them to use less. Right. I had a talk with Oasis many years ago about creating specific spaces for TGNC folk who live or who haven't experienced a life in recovery, right? And that's because they don't deal with the person, they deal with the drugs. So if you put a trans masculine person in the room, if you have like a binary support groups inside these programs, which they predominantly do, like an all males group and an all women's group, where would someone non-binary or gender non-conforming go? And where would someone who's trans masculine, would he even feel comfortable in a space like that, talking about his experience with drugs in a room full of other cis men? You see what I'm saying? All those
Absolutely.
things and nuances come into place, which is why we need to create our own spaces for that, and not just like something that, I understand the importance of having a drop-in center and support groups, but that's only for predominantly 2 to 3 hours out of a week.
Right.
So where are they getting the rest of the support from?
Hmm.
Where's the residential space that they can go and live and get some time in around other people like themselves and learn to navigate substance use and how to live
Absolutely.
without it? So that's
No,
my whole
so
spiel
true.
on it.
That's a really good perspective too, because I think a lot of times when we talk about like particularly crystal meth use, when we're talking about Tina and stuff like that, we
Mhm.
don't see the same resources that we see for opiates, right? When we talk about heroin, we talk about fentanyl, talk
Mhm.
about other pills, right? There's a lot of money and there's funding, and a lot of that people would argue, and I think they're right, is because we started to see this issue pop up in white spaces, right? And that's the only reason that people really give a shit about it now is because it's starting to affect suburbia. It's starting to get
What do
into,
you mean with the crystal meth?
well, so the thing is
Because
meth,
that's where it came from.
yeah, so that's the thing is meth, right? It has this like
Mhm.
this whole like narrative of being in like the poor like white spaces out in middle America, but we know
Mhm.
that a lot of white gay men were the ones giving the meth to black and brown young gay men, getting them hooked on it. Like in 2017 when we saw that man die, right? And that
The
like
young man,
billionaire.
and it was a high profile billionaire
Yes.
person who
And
was
then it
giving them the
happened
drug.
again, and that was that they didn't do anything in 2017. In 2019, that's when they started intervening, and then they finally said, "Oh yeah, he was doing X, Y, and Z thing." So I think
Exactly.
it's, but like you're saying, and 100%, I think a lot of people don't know that, and it's not talked
Right.
about. I mean, there are documentaries. There's like Party Boy, right, which is a fantastic documentary talking about
Right.
this, and it's amazing. But can you talk a little bit more about Meth and Tina and Ballroom We Care and the work that you're actively doing? Because I think we don't talk enough about it. So I want to make sure that people really understand, what are the resources? What is your, organization? What is your agency doing?
So, as a resident host in Ballroom We Care, for many of us, Ballroom is our refuge and our saving grace. As a community, throughout the years, we've experienced substance use, abuse, neglect, homophobia, transphobia, gender identity discrimination, incarceration, mental illness, and unfortunately, untimely and unexpected death. We've witnessed individuals who have cried out for help. And this is our time, and Ballroom came together collectively. And Ballroom We Care is a grassroots intervention that was created by 4 ballroom leaders: Tim Lavin, Uncle Mike, Ebony, Luna Khan, and rest in peace to Hector Extravaganza, in response to the crystal meth related deaths they noticed in the New York City ballroom scene. Today, Ballroom We Care provides support, education, awareness, and identify cultural competent resources to the members of ballroom community who are struggling with crystal meth and crystal meth related and mental health illness issues.
Yep.
And Housing Works provide a T Haven. It's called T Haven. It's a
Yep.
support group for trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary people of color, predominantly Black and Brown voices. And in that workshop, you'll get to learn things like what safety looks like when substance controls you, speaking about the use of substance, taking back your power, and disassociating from emotional trauma and pain. And this is an 8-week workshop that they talk about a variety of topics to try to get people into more of a harm reductive lens and approach to substance use. Yeah, so that one is the one that I was able to do, and we reached over 397 trans people of color so far. Yeah,
That's awesome.
we have live testimonies. Some of them are on my Instagram page. If you go down, I think it's one that I shared. One, it's like a little cartoon of me talking about it, but then I move away, and then you'll see like some of the live statements from some of the people that actually took the training.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that that's still going on too, because we know that like once we leave an organization or agency, sometimes the work
they're still doing it.
shuts
Yeah, they're
off.
still doing it. Actually, I was just on the phone with her a little bit earlier. She was telling me about the retreat they just had and how she wished I was still there to be able to provide that support. And most of the people actually got used to me. Like my community calls me Auntie Taby. And being in this position in the City Commissions of Human Rights actually gives me the ability to empower them around their protections that they have in place. You know what I'm saying? And normalize, no matter what level that they are in their transition, that they are protected and that they have rights here in the state of New York City. Right. So I represent my community, and that's important, right? Representation is important.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Well, because if they see you doing it, they're like, if Tabytha can do it, I can do it too.
Exactly. For someone who's a former substance abuse user, former sex worker, now working in the city spaces and being the voice for our community, because rarely, you don't see us in city council or in spaces that has to deal with human rights. So having a trans person here is clearly indicating that New York believes that trans rights are human rights. You can quote that.
Absolutely. I will quote that. Let's put it on a freaking shirt, right? Everybody wear it. Let's go. I love that. So I know you're involved in a lot of projects, but what would you say is right now your passion? Like, what's your main focus? It doesn't have to necessarily be your job, like outside of work. Like, where are you spending a lot of your time and energy, or most of it?
On Ballroom We Care in Trans New York. So Trans New York is an agency that is doing job development. I'm doing a lot, so I'm going to try to get you the list from all of it, okay? So Trans New York is a job development, go figure, we were talking about it. It's a 6-week cohort for trans people. I just shared it on my Facebook, and I'll share it on my Instagram later. They have a listening session coming in, and it's a 6-week workshop where they will empower them after they will learn how to do resume building, interviewing. Some of them go on to do internships at other stores like Doc Martin and stuff like that. They also have people that are invested in hiring the trans community. And it's a 6-week workshop, and then they will empower you by incentivizing you upon completion $300 via Zelle or Venmo to actually complete. Their first cohort, they had completed 15 to 16 trans people who had took this cohort and were giving out the incentivized, and I think 2 of them have moved on and gotten jobs.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do they do any follow-up with the other folks who didn't move on? Like, are there other resources?
Yeah, there's a lot of follow-up. I think they have a whole team. This is just started. It's a nonprofit that just started.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Jennifer Hurley and Mae from Goldman Sachs. So there's a few people that's on the board right now that's actually trying to get this thing up and motivated. We know the importance of empowering trans people in employment and education. That's another barrier, and this is why most people actually spin out to substance as well. It's because,
Right.
employment instability and housing instability. So those are things that collectively, like everything that I'm involved with, works with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it all
Zep
comes back.
Wellness is
Yeah.
Zep Wellness runs a quarterly program that for sex workers that does a sex worker relief fund, and we hit every state. So it's in quarters. So this for the month of January, February, and March, we're working on the emphasis is in the West. And what happens is one woman or one trans woman of color, predominantly trans sex worker, and that's the target, will receive $500 in funding towards
Wow.
whatever they want. So I am the director of that project.
And can you say that one more time for me? That was what
Is the
wellness?
ZEP Wellness? Yes,
Wellness. Okay.
they actually have They actually have a social media platform, so you can list all those things under it. I think it's important that
Yeah.
people understand where they can go for resources.
Well, that's exactly the point of it because I want to make sure that people know where they can go because you never know who's going to come across this at one point or another. And
Right.
like this information, we're going to be talking about this for time to come. And that kind of leads me
Mhm.
to my next question is do you see things kind of getting better? Like in the sense of, I feel like traditionally it's been kind of like housing is over here, mental health is over here, physical health is over here, LGBTQIA services or trans services are over here. Do you feel like things are kind of, because you're doing work at a lot of different intersections and they're all convening and coming together? Do you see that being like a new pattern that's emerging?
I think it should be a new pattern. I think with the lack of funding to support trans-led organizations, it's the main problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm just one person, and you already see the multiple hats that I wear. So
Yeah.
if organizations were empowered to inform, educate, and actually hire more trans people of color, then the work would be done. I know in some spaces they are adapting this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as thorough as I would like it to be. There's still a high number of housing instability. There's still a high
Yeah.
number of employment instability that exists within our community. And I see things are moving in the right direction. I just wish it got there a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, especially considering that each year that passes, whenever we hit November, right, we talk about Trans Day of Remembrance,
Hmm.
which it's always so depressing. It's always awful.
Right,
It's always a time when we're like, oh, it's even worse than the year before. It's
right.
always like, is there ever going to be a time? I mean, I hope sooner rather than later, a time when we're not seeing the same. It's literally, you could copy and paste like the same article and just change the number. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
I'm actually really tired of showing up saying and not one more when there's, these things happen, right? And I'm a victim of violence, you understand? So a survivor of violence. So I know what that looks like to be, attacked because I exist. So I understand the importance of safety and learning and understanding my rights, which is why I know, go figure that I would transition from, you know, office management to advocacy to policy advocacy to harm reduction to direct services to case management to now working in the
Mm-hmm.
city as an associate human rights specialist, speaking on important things and informing and empowering other communities when they want to work with trans people
Mm-hmm.
and teaching them the best practices about it and the rights that we have. Most of it is empowerment to us, right? And also to those who are looking to work with us.
Absolutely. So, with your new job as an associate human rights specialist, I know you're very new there. I think you said you started,
Mhm.
what, like a month or so
Yeah,
ago?
about 3 weeks going in. Yeah.
Wow. So, where do you think this work is going to take you, or what's kind of like your vision for it? What do you want to do with this role?
What I would like to do with this vote is just show that the community that the New York City commissions believe that trans rights are human rights, and we will do and we would within my capacity to continue that the messaging is clear
Mm,
that
mm,
trans rights are human rights. What I would like to see us do is things that we can't do as a city agency, right? So the stuff that we need comes from a more pressing, like a more higher level, like government, legislation, things like
mm,
that. But there's agencies that are in place to do that. From here, my responsibility and my commitment to my community is to represent them and make sure that our voices are heard in city council in spaces where it's needed, so when
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for me to speak to my constituents on the importance of supporting our community, that's where I come in at, because I know what the community needs. And in regards to talking to people who are looking to work and get
Mm-hmm.
involved with trans people,
Mm-hmm.
giving them specific trainings that show them how to deal with us and the rights that we have. So in case
Yeah.
they violate, I understand that with this job, it gives me a certain privilege. I have access to spaces that others won't. I have access to letting my voice heard when others can't. Right. So we need to look at what privilege and access looks like. And for
Mm-hmm.
some of us that have it, what does that look like? Creating a space. For
Mm-hmm.
others, like my predecessor Chanel, this
Mm-hmm.
was her job. She made sure that she created space so another trans woman will have it when she moves on, and so forth and so forth. And
Wow.
that's the infrastructure that we have to use until one of us is the governor, until one of us is the mayor. You see?
Yep.
So little by little things are happening around us. And I'm blessed to be connected to those who are actually being agents of change.
Right. Right. Being about it, not just saying it and doing it
Mhm.
because it's the cool thing to do or it looks
Of
good.
course.
Yeah, like you
Mhm.
said, ticking off a box. I think that unfortunately happens a lot. It's like even if we see grants or applications, certain things open up. A lot of times it's because they want to check off that diversity box or like all this DEI work that happens now. It's like, what's actually happening? Are we setting people up for failure? Are we getting people in just to say that we're looking like woke or we're looking with it or we're about the cause that's going on? And I think it doesn't get spoken about enough in like queer spaces, right? Because you
Right.
still have the same hierarchy. You still have like the older gay white
Mhm.
men, right? Who have been there for 30, 40 years doing
Right. And
the same thing.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot that goes on in these
It is a
spaces.
lot.
And like I said, we as people have to create and foster what that development actually looks like to empower the next trans woman.
Right,
And it shouldn't be our responsibility, right?
right.
But unfortunately it is. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the civil rights movement was off the back of black and brown queer folk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these liberations and these liberties that our siblings are now experiencing is a direct result of black trans women and black and brown queer folk.
Right. Absolutely.
Predated back to the civil rights movement where we were
Absolutely.
erased. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, I mean, it just is what it is. And
It is.
and for the people who will be watching this, you probably seen some wardrobe changes. You've seen some things happen. That's because we definitely want to get the messaging correctly, and it's important that we do it with the integrity and the intentions why this was started and why we want to get the messaging out. So I just want to say thank you, Taylor, for even having me,
Oh
for
my gosh.
even making me your harm reduction baddie.
Listen,
You know,
listen,
I
I need people
thank you
like
to the
you.
community and people who referred me to you. It was a pleasure, and I thank you for what you do to amplify the voices and raise awareness for our community as we continue to try to thrive and live a better life that's full with equity and then equality.
Too. So I'm so glad we're starting off with New York. We're starting off with you in the ballroom scene because
That's right.
that's where we're at. But I'm super stoked for it. So thank you so much. I know we'll be in contact for a long time to come. And if you need me for anything, I'm here. Listen, make it happen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.